I would say when you talk about systemic racism generally, there's a mountain to climb with our partners in Quebec. I think everyone wants to tackle racism. I think if you don't recognize the existence of the phenomenon of the disproportionate impact, and when you talk about systemic racism, yes, it is informed by individual events, but it's about the system and the impact and the disproportionate outcome that a systemically racist system has on principally in Canada, racialized more often than not Black communities and Indigenous peoples along similar proportions when you talk about Black and Indigenous peoples, with different effects, obviously. And certainly that has recognizing it is one thing, and I think what the horrifying video that we all saw with respect to Joyce Echaquan in her last moments is something that for a lot of non-Indigenous people in Canada was surprising and shocking, but for many Indigenous peoples was, while shocking, not a surprise. And I think the thing that has bothered me the most bizarrely is a lot of the lived experience that I've heard after that, but also the fact that it is to some extent normalized. People say this is going to happen when I go in, and that's not right. It's not right in a system that, you know, I as a non-Indigenous Canadian, I'm someone who believes in how wonderful my healthcare system is, yet it's consistently treated Indigenous peoples as second or third class citizens. So the realization is one, and the federal government has looked at the Joyce's principle as there's a number of principles that the people of Manawan, Atikamekw people, have ratified as part of their community process and are pushing forward. It's aimed at Quebec and the federal government, but there's no reason why it shouldn't apply nationally to all provinces who jealously guard their healthcare system. You know, you see things and things still occurring. Marianne Turpel-Lafont in BC issued a report with respect to how people were playing sort of a form of lottery and guessing people's alcohol levels and coming into emergency in BC, which the healthcare system in which we hold up and their efforts in reconciliation we hold up as an example, yet this is still occurring in Canada. And the question arises as to the role of the federal government in this, and I believe there is an important role of the federal government in leading the charge in fighting systemic racism, in ensuring Indigenous voices and distinctions-based healthcare legislation, which I'm tasked to do as part of my mandate letter. But certainly COVID and events like these have accentuated the need to move quicker on this. We had Minister Bennett and I had a along with Minister Patty Haidu, had a discussion with a number of, it was a large discussion about a week after the death of Joyce Echaquan with about 400 participants on Zoom, obviously. It's a bit of a complication doing that in COVID, where you want to be with people and be sharing with them personally in a room, but it allowed for a greater number of people. A week after the death of Joyce, and it featured the lived experiences of a lot of Indigenous physicians and continuing to hear their voices. And I think some of the shocking things we heard there were testament to the work that needs to be done in ensuring that professional organizations continue to be held to account. I mean, we're talking about the cream of the crop of people that have fought all odds to become what is a very difficult profession to get into, which is medicine, and are still being treated as second-class citizens in a racist fashion, or are suffering the effects of systemic racism in their healthcare system. I could go through some of the testimony, but it's certainly compelling. It's certainly proof that there's more work to do. But I think that lies squarely on a number of areas, not just professional organizations and universities, but also the provinces and us as the federal government, as we look at the interplay between how we serve Indigenous peoples in the healthcare system, principally in case of the federal government on reserve, but the interlinks with the provincial system. So we have a follow-up meeting in about 2 weeks. We want to be obviously the first meeting that we had, while successful and allowed a place to hear voices of people that aren't often heard with respect to their experiences. Featured a doctor from Akwesasne with a great testimonial. There's need for an action plan. People want to see action. And so this will sort of be a start, I believe, for me to discuss about some of the work I need to do with my team on distinctions-based Inuit, Métis, and First Nations healthcare legislation and how that dovetails into the Canada Health Act. I don't know. There's a lot of work and diligence to be done, but perhaps even some interim measures that need to be put into place to ensure that we keep people's feet to the fire when it comes to ensuring that people are being treated as first-class citizens in the healthcare system as well. And I suspect as investments that will need to be made. When obviously you can put as much blame on other people, but sometimes you obviously got to look at yourself and say, what does the federal government need to do? What are the continued investments the federal government needs to do in healthcare, in mental health, for example, which is the hidden epidemic of COVID. These are all elements that I think we'll try to tease out as part of a more action-oriented meeting in about 2 weeks with some of the same participants, but with a new renewed focus on action.